Okay, now number 5 on our list is the 98.5 Sports Hub, and they really should be number 6 because, in the words of my Uncle Freddie, they ain't done nothing yet. That's Uncle Freddie.
In fairness, they've only been around.
They've only been around,
so
but
I
I mean,
to do anything.
So, what's the early take on what these guys have to offer? I've tuned in here and there. To me, the one thing that they can provide is when I get a little sick of when I want to hear sports radio, I'm listening to WEI and they're doing something that irritates me. I could turn it off, or I could just hit another button and I can see what the Sports Hub has to say.
I think that the key for them, and they're going to establish their identity of what they are, as the days and weeks go by. But I think the key for them is to be a true alternative. I think if you try to...
But what kind of alternative can you be?
Well,
it's guys yapping about sports.
And
I think the key is that you show, a knowledge about sports that maybe goes beyond the New England construct. I mean, sometimes you get the impression listening to EEI that the hosts on that show know about the New England teams and nothing else. Now, I don't know if that's because that's what the audience wants or if that's what they've, decided.
Well, I think how else? What are you supposed to? How can you know more than that? I mean, you have to focus on one area.
The little that I've heard of them so far, a lot of it has been their night guy, Damon. I believe it's Amendolara.
That guy gets a lot of airtime.
He does. He's on the weekends. He's on at night, which is part of the reason why I've heard so much of his shows. And he comes from Miami. He's a New Yorker, comes from Miami. And
so that's a natural fit.
Well, it's not even so much that it's a natural fit. What it is it gives you that sort of perspective where there are teams in these leagues other than the Red Sox, the Patriots, the Celtics, and the Bruins.
Sure.
If you want to talk about, an issue that kind of spans the league, he's able to give you a little bit more because he's used to, hosting a show that's not so New England centered. And I think that could be where they find their niche.
I don't want to kind of read into too much of. I don't know what the hiring process was at the Sports Hub, but there's a number of people within the Boston media who were expected to get that nighttime job.
Right.
Who everybody would say would be the perfect fit because people look at EEI and they think that Mike Adams' show is probably the weakest of that lineup. So if you're going to attack them, that's the time slot to attack them.
Yeah.
And when you look at all the names that were thrown about and they brought this guy in anyway, I mean, it shows that that's probably exactly what they're looking for, at least in that time slot, is that type of direction. The guy is definitely a pro, and I think that is where he's going to be able to gain his ground, is he's probably more of a professional radio guy than the other people on the station.
Yeah.
Well, I think the way you brought that up is interesting because you talk about attacking EEI. I think the wrong way to go about doing that is to get EEI retreads who EEI doesn't want for full-time shows and say, hey, here's your chance.
Is that the case, though?
I'm just saying that...
I mean, I can't imagine... I mean, if we're talking about Michael Felger, I know he's bounced around a bit, but...
Well, I'm not talking so much about him. I mean, we've got, Scott Zolak and Tangway have the midday show. I mean, that is a show that is clearly modeled after the EEI... Let's beat a topic into the ground. Let's try to inflame people and get them to call in because they're angry or they think we're dumb or stuff like that.
I like Gary Tangway.
Well, that's your opinion. You can be wrong whenever you'd like.
Can I do my Gary Tangway?
Sure. I'd like to see this. I've never seen
this. This is my Gary Tangway imitating Stuart Scott. Okay? That's how it goes. Booyah. Thank you very much. Well, you know what? I think Tangway's... I like him. I think he's knowledgeable. I mean, the guy has a great set of pipes, for one thing. You can't deny that. He's got one of the greatest...
Yes,
he's got probably the greatest voice of anybody.
He can scream like a banshee like nobody's business.
Oh, he's got a great... I like him. I'm sorry, Gary Tangway, if you're watching this, I think you're doing a good job.
I mean, when I look at what they've come out of the gate with, and I understand, and I don't want to make assumptions because I don't know. I read things on the internet, but I don't necessarily believe everything that I read when it comes to contracts and stuff. But I think a certain portion of what they're bringing over, they were kind of stuck with, contractually speaking, from the WBCN mold.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so you're paying Toucher and Rich all this money to do a morning show. All of a sudden, the FM rock folds, and you need to bring them over to your sports station. So I think they're kind of in over their head to begin with. But that show is terrible. When it comes, I'm sorry, I didn't like the program when it was whatever they did on.
It's
BCN.
Not a smooth adjustment to sports,
and it's definitely not a smooth adjustment to sports. And you go through the trouble of getting John Wallach from WEEI, who I think is one of the most underappreciated talents that worked at that station, just for the hardworking guy that he is.
Yep.
And you're immediately putting him with these two clowns.
Well, they probably need him.
So you're going to bury them before you've given them a chance to establish themselves in this new station, when in reality, they probably have the most established audience of any show on that network.
That's true. They definitely are carrying over that audience from when and they were, very good competition in that time slot when they were on the FM station. But I just think it doesn't fit. It's not natural. I would rather that they did their show on that station.
Now,
and not worried about.
I think that they are doing a very good job of keeping a lot of what made their show popular and bringing it over here. I like them. I listened to them more in the afternoons when they were on before they moved them up to mornings. But what they've done, and what I think the Sports Hub has done very well, is not making it all about just having hosts talk for 4 hours and take phone calls. They bring in a lot of experts. They bring in players. They bring in coaches. I know when all of the Favre stuff was spinning around, Toucher and Rich I don't know if they got him specifically, but they got a guy from Green Bay to come in and talk about Favre. If you can get that sort of more informed sports talk that is more than just, guys riffing on things where they really probably don't have two legs to stand on, that gets my attention. If I can listen and know that I'm going to learn something and that, it's going to be I'm going to have a stronger opinion than just something some guy happens to think, that gets my interest.
I think I've got the EEI blinders on too, where I'm so used to the idea of sports talk radio having to be the hosts espousing what they think all this time, instead of actually just being radio hosts who are transitioning into knowledgeable sports guests, knowledgeable sports calls, and instead of just running the show themselves with what their thoughts and opinions are.
Wow.
Are we up to MVP?
Wait a minute. Did Koosh just win you over?
I see his
Gave
point.
you food for thought.
I see his point.
Because if we're talking about sports radio, you should say that at no point when someone else makes a good point should you ever change your own view. Because
you say, good point by you.
No, that's the one thing that irritates me about sports talk radio is that they have their view, and they can hear a very good argument against their view, and it's either shout you down, hang up on you, or just don't acknowledge that it ever happened.
Exactly, and that's the formula, and that's what works for them.
I know that one of the problems with the Sports Hub, they've taken over the Bruins home games, and for what I understand, here in this area, you can't really get it that great. So that's something they're going to have to work on a little bit going ahead. So
those are two established. Between the Patriots and the Bruins, the Patriots have the affiliates.
But the Patriots have more affiliates. The Bruins right now don't.
The Bruins have never had to have that problem because they were on a station that didn't need affiliates.
Right.
You could get WBZ anywhere. So let's give them a chance to figure that out.
Okay, and it's maybe a little too early to name an MVP of the. So we'll leave that for greater days. But overall, I'd say there's some early promise. I think they suffer a little bit in comparison to EEI right now, but
Can I just say this? Though?
Sure.
The FM broadcast is pristine. I mean, it's just great sounding, and the fact that obviously we get EEI FM here, but for people who don't get EEI FM and they're used to listening to it on the best AM they can possibly get, I think FM will make a big difference for people going forward, even if they don't really necessarily like what's going on the station. The fact that it is FM is a huge plus for them.
All right, so hang in there, Sports Hub. We may or may not be rooting for you, depending on our.
We want them all.
We want everyone to succeed. So
I don't.